Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a franchise that will always have a special place in my heart. It's the first ever TCG that I've ever played. But before there were card games on motorcycles, did you know there were also card games with dice and also actual toys, you know? It's called Dungeon Dice Monsters! Dungeon Dice Monsters was a board game in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise released in 2000 in Japan and in North America in 2002. The game is a collective miniature strategy game based around rolling dice, summoning creatures onto the board and making them move around and attack other creatures and other actions depending on what you roll. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime had like 4 episodes dedicated to a full round of this game, and it was made real after those episodes aired. From what I understand, the English dub even had a special limited edition version where the box came with an exclusive Blue Eyes White Dragon, but I as a kid only got the regular version because my young self only played the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game. I never really read the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, but I heard that they touch on Dungeon Dice Monsters in there as well, and it's apparently much more darker and better than what they did in the anime. In the anime, the Dungeon Dice Monsters arc is where we get first introduced to Duke Devlin, who becomes a mainstay character later on. He's the one who invented Dungeon Dice Monsters and was going to have a business deal with Pegasus to distribute the Dungeon Dice Monsters game globally. But after Yugi beat Pegasus in the Duelist Kingdom arc, this allegedly made the duel fall apart. So Duke wants to get revenge on Yugi, accuses him of cheating against Pegasus, and plans to expose that Yugi cheated by beating him at Dungeon Dice Monsters, a game that Yugi never played or heard of before this. Yeah, it made no sense story-wise.
Now, Yugi, I'll expose you for what you really are. A good-for-nothing cheater. You can't even hold your own in Dungeon Dice Monsters. The whole world's about to see you lose, Yugi, and you'll be exposed as the sham that you are.
That doesn't make sense.
It was also noteworthy for being the arc that Joey was made to wear a dog suit. Yeah, it can't be any more painfully obvious that this not only was a filler arc, but also just a giant advertisement for the real-life game. The Dungeon Dice Monster story arc in a narrative perspective was not at all good. It couldn't be any more painfully obvious Yugi was going to win despite being a complete noob, since one of the conditions for if Yugi lost was,
you lose this game, and you promise to never play Duel Monsters ever again.
Yeah, you really expected Yugi to lose here? The build-up was really dumb. The cheerleader characters annoys me worse than Taya. No joke, I have to press fast forward every time they're about to speak. And Yugi wins because Dark Magician has like 50 special main character abilities. The game itself, watching the anime though, actually looked really fun. So I can't say I wasn't curious or intrigued to try it out. The game actually has 2 versions, the Japanese and the English versions. While it's relatively the same game with the same pieces, there are a few things that they changed for the English version. So for this review, I'm going to focus purely on the North American English version. Yes, I know some of my figures in my collection are Japanese versions, but they work the same way and they're hard to collect, so bear with me here. Released in early 2002 with the starter set and a few expansions, the game unfortunately bombed. 137 figures with cards were scheduled, but unfortunately the lack of support and bad sales caused Mattel to pull the plug way too early. Japan saw the game released a bit longer before eventually being pulled too, and as a result Japan got more different monster figures than we ever got. I want to think that it's because they tried selling this game at the big name chain stores like Walmart and Toys R Us rather than local GameStops that caused it to tank like it did. So as a result, the game is extremely hard to collect without closing your bank account. Jesus Christ, look at some of the prices. They even go up to the hundreds, my god! And look at the coolest figures Japan got that we didn't. Barrel Dragon, Summon Skull, Karibo even got a figure. Holy crap, Slifer the Sky Dragon and Obelisk the Tormentor even got figures. I actually got some sort of limited edition collection where it came with like a bronze Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon and a bronze Obelisk the Tormentor. I mean, they're bronze and they kind of don't look as good as how they would look actually like painted, but hey, I got them, so at least they're real. And it was only like 40 bucks or something. The game is played on a 13x19 tile board with 2 players represented by these cute little Monster Lord figures. The starter set does come with a playmat, but I got this custom playmat off an eBay seller. Both players have a set of 10 monsters or items that you can summon onto the board by taking turns rolling dice. The North American version has 4 sets of 3 dice grouped together based on the level of the dice. To summon a monster, you roll the 3 dice simultaneously and at least 2 of the 3 dice have to match the summon side to summon a monster of that level specified on the dice. So if you roll the level 2 dice and 2 of them land on the summon crest, you can summon a level 2 monster. When summoning a monster, you can pick a path piece and set it on the board, with the first piece having to connect to your monster lord, and other pieces afterward have to connect to one of your squares and can't overlap another. Monsters in the dungeon have 3 stats: HP, attack, and defense. When the monster attacks, it deals the number of attack points it has to the opposing monster's HP, calculated in tens. When a monster's HP drops to 0, it is destroyed and removed from the game and can't be used ever again. Unless this game has like a monster reborn ability that I'm not aware of. However, a monster being attacked can defend itself by its defense points. If it does, they take the value of its defense points and subtracts it from the attacking monster's attack points, and the difference is dealt to the HP. And to use that defense, they have to use crests. The dice have 6 crests that you can land on: Summon, Movement, Magic, Attack, Defense, and Trap. If you land on any of the crests other than the summon on your dice rolls, you can store them in your crest pool to use later in the game. Some monsters use magic or trap crests to activate certain special abilities, and monsters need movement crests to be able to move around the board, but however, monsters with flying require 2 movement crests to move 1 space. And yes, they can also fly over non-flying monsters. The advantage that flying monsters have is that it can't be attacked by monsters that don't have the flying ability, or in Battle Warrior's case, reach as they call it in Magic the Gathering. And also keep in mind, attack and defense crests can only be spent once a round unless the monster has an ability that says otherwise, and monsters can move around as much as they like as long as you can spend the movement crests for them. Also, the crest pool has a max capacity of 10 each. The end goal of the game is hit your opponent directly 3 times with your monster to win. The English game changes the roll phase from the Japanese version. Instead of rolling once, you roll twice, with only 1 summon per turn. So if you roll 2 summon crests twice, you're kinda screwed. If you roll your dice and land on all 3 of your dice on summon crest, you can summon a monster 1 level above the dice level. So if you roll and land on 3 level 2 crests, you can summon a level 3 monster if you want to. In the Japanese version, the dice unfolded and made the path like in the anime, but in the English version, they provide pre-made paths in 2 different colors, which I find a lot more better since it's less restrictive when you dimension the dice. And in the Japanese version, you build a dice pool of 15 dice and around the monsters and items, since 10 of the dice are used to make dungeon paths. But in the English version, you really only have to choose 10 monsters or items, so the team building is a lot more easier, since the English release sets only come with a card and figure and no dice, unlike Japanese version. Also, not to mention, I prefer the English version over the Japanese version a lot more because the Japanese dice, they unfold, which is cool, but not only do they have only 1 path when you unfold, but I find that it's a little bit flimsy sometimes. When you roll them, they might fall apart. Dungeon Dice Monsters is a game where you can just pick it up and start playing right away without having to know too many complicated strategies, and you don't need to be the most smartest person to really understand the rules. The starter set provides 2 abacuses for keeping track of your resources, gives you plenty of dungeon path to use, even counters for your monster's hit points if you want, though you could just use dice for that. Despite the game being completely luck-based through dice rolls, it actually has a fair degree of strategy, thought, depth, and decision-making to really make the game actually fun to play. Monsters can come between levels 1 and 4. Low-level monsters are easier to get out, but their stats are so low that they're more likely to die early game, while higher-level monsters are harder to get out, but when they do come out, you're gifted with a giant beat stick that can slaughter all your opponent's monsters. So it doesn't seem like any monster really sucks in this game. Low-level monsters are great for building your dungeon path quickly and getting fast but weak monsters out on the board. Higher-level monsters are very powerful and will likely last the rest of the game, but they're harder to get out. So do you go for spamming low-level monsters that can give you plenty to work with at the cost of getting murdered by the gust of wind? Or do you go for high-level monsters that can annihilate anything in their path, but you're likely to waste a good amount of turns to summon? Which dice level group do you wish to use that will likely give you a good chance of getting good crests that you need? Which of your monsters is best for attacking or defending? Will you need to sacrifice a monster to protect yourself? There's layers upon layers of strategy being used to play this game, and that is on top of the unpredictability of rolling dice, so you kind of have to expect failure since you'll never know when dice rolls are going to work in your favor. Huh, wow, a game that is built around luck but actually has depth and strategy being put into it. You hear that, Bakugan Gen 3? In regards to the gameplay, I think Dungeon Dice Monsters is actually a very well designed board game. There's plenty of room to make your own team, and the game is fairly balanced to appeal both to beginners and experts. The game's figure pieces, while they're in essence toys, they actually serve as the main interactions of the game. The design of the figures are generally pretty good most of the time. The dragons and creatures I think really look the best in comparison to the humanoid figures. I think because of the small designs of the figures, the painting struggles really with the details, especially on figures that have faces. Look at the main guy, Blackluster Soldier here. It doesn't look good at all. His face is very badly deformed. Now look at some of the dragons here. Blackland Fire Dragon, Gator Dragon, Red Eyes Black Dragon. Now these are badass designs. Gator Dragon here reminds me of Dragonoid a bit. It's pretty cool. By the way, Dark Magician here, yeah, I have one in real life as well, and he's just a vanilla monster with no mystic box or magical hats like in the show. There is actually an Arcana version Dark Magician in the game that's a level 3 and has special abilities but is weaker than the vanilla. However, that one is only in the Japanese version. That being said, the figures can be really hit or miss in terms of design, but the way they interact on the board really gives me the same feeling seeing them fight in the anime.
Special attack! Your blast lizard is about to be bowled over!
To destroy monster's space, so I believe I move all the way up here and nuke your blast lizard! No! Bitch.
Thunderball!
One of my favorite strategies is summoning out Parrot Dragon on my first turn, putting him right in front of me. Parrot Dragon adds 10 defense points to all my dragons in the dungeon, including himself. And since he has flying, a lot of the times my opponent won't get to my heart points unless they have a flying monster or reach monster, or they build Dungeon Path to attack me from the side. Also, Blast Lizard is one of the most broken monsters in this game. I should know, because I have one. Now, Blast Lizard is a monster where his effect is for 3 magic crests, he can blow up a level 1 monster. And if you want to blow up something that's way higher, you have to add 1 magic crest for each individual level. So if you want to blow up a level 4, you can with 6 magic crests. See, I dimension Blast Lizard as far away from everyone else as possible, roll and stack up as much magic crests as I can, and he would just blow every monster away. Yeah, I got a feeling if this game never died out or lasted long enough for there to be a competitive scene, the Blast Lizard will be first on the ban list. One of the main strategies in the game is also in the positioning of your dungeon path placements. Most of the time players will just make a straight path to the other side of the board. Duke in the anime actually created his path to try and block out Yugi and restrict him from being able to summon swarm monsters or build a forward path to Duke, which is a really good game tip. And the game also has a possibility of bricking. If you have the worst luck in the world, it's possible for your opponent to auto-win by summoning monsters until their dungeon path completely blocks your monster lord. Also, going back to the Blast Lizard, if all 10 of your monsters end up biting the dust, you practically auto-lose because you got no monsters left to fight back with. That being said, building your team is not entirely difficult as long as you keep a good ratio of levels. Going for more level 1 and level 2 monsters while having like 2 or 3 level 3s and 4s is a good way to ensure you can get yourself on the board quickly. And considering the special abilities synergizing with your other monsters is also a big consideration as well. The difficulty curve of the game is not at all big, and it's perfectly balanced for anyone to just play. That being said, there are some things that are too big to ignore. Like I said before, the designs on some of the monsters are bad, so it can be a detriment for people that want to try the game based on the monster designs. Second, the price of entry for a full-blown game back in the day was very high. You had to buy the starter set to get the mat, dice, and abacuses. From what I heard, it was around 20 to 25 bucks. And while the starter set came with 6 figures for yourself, you still needed to buy another 4 to compete. I think from the limited information I gathered, the expansions were like $10 a piece as well. Nowadays, because the game is canned, there is no market price for these things, so people can just charge out the wazoo for these. No warp vortex! Even though I think that the pre-made plastic terrain pieces were a good idea, the only way to get them was from the starter set, and even then there wasn't a lot. So for more variety, you had to find more of the starter set or expect your opponent to have more. Pre-game setup, your table is going to be littered with crap all over the place because the game requires a lot of table real estate. Another reason that I think is why this game never took off was that it's not portable enough. Unlike Yu-Gi-Oh where it's easy to carry cards around, Dungeon Dice Monsters needs a whole lot of stuff where you're going to be needing a backpack to move this everywhere. The game also can take quite a long time, probably like 30 to 45 minutes on average. Despite all that, I think that Dungeon Dice Monsters was a real hidden gem that Yu-Gi-Oh had for its day. It was an amazing game that is still being talked about today and even being played by collectors and fans of Yu-Gi-Oh! Even if Yu-Gi-Oh is not a game you're interested in or it's not a franchise you're familiar with, Dungeon Dice Monsters I think is a game that appeals to strangers and fans alike because of the war game tactics and strategical elements being incorporated in a dice game. It's a great board game that unfortunately met its demise way too early because the world back then was just not ready for it. But with the resurging popularity of board games that the world is going through right now since the COVID-19 pandemic, I think if Dungeon Dice Monsters did a relaunch by marketing as a board game, complete with a starter set but with more dungeon paths and maybe 20 different figures to be sold at retail stores, and expansions for more different figures sold at local game shops, perhaps the game will have a chance at succeeding. I would love to get the figures that the Japanese versions got. Maybe hopefully a relaunch of the game will last long enough Red Dragon Archfiend will get a figure. That would be awesome. Maybe there would be a mobile version so that people don't have to collect figures in the first place. I know that there is also a Game Boy Advance version that was kinda garbage because the AI was stupid and was a lame grind fest. On the bright side, some of the Dungeon Dice Monster cards that Duke used in the anime, as well as some Dungeon Dice Monster exclusive monsters, have become actual real cards in the TCG. But until the time comes, unfortunately, Dungeon Dice Monsters will remain a lost gem that not a lot of people will be able to try for themselves because the remaining existing figures and game pieces are being price gouged. So that was Dungeon Dice Monsters. Do you have any cool memories of this game? Let me know in the comments down below. Want to see the full game where the footage from this video came from? Check out our second channel, Enter Scoop Phase, right now. Support Baku Talk by pressing the thumbs up and give us a subscribe for more awesome, amazing content. I've been Haru Ren. Thank God for Rapid Fire. Venture use based, and remember to dimension the dice. Bye.